I'm here more settled and focused on the issue of the Forum for Muslim Democrats. We reflected on it as early as March 2012. I was in Dubai, and then looking at the changing political landscape in the Arab world. And you know, I am a great admirer of the changes, the phenomenal changes of Turkey, my colleague Tayyip Erdogan, and would want him to succeed, to have a showcase that Muslim countries can be seen to be more honorable in terms of applying principles of good governance. And close by, our neighbor, Indonesia, we have seen this phenomenal transformation into a vibrant democracy. Not easy, but it took personalities, key personalities, Tayyip Erdogan and his colleagues in Turkey, facing the wrath of authoritarian military rule, extremely fundamentally secular, not secular that we understand. I mean, to the extent that you wear hijab or just a scarf, you can't enter the presidential palace. You can go to the White House, by the way, but you can't enter presidential palace those days. But you can see this transformation, how difficult it was. And I said, in Indonesia, it took a personality like Habibie. I've been criticized by many of my Indonesian colleagues. They say that I do not give due recognition to many other personalities. Now, I'm not discounting the enormous role of so many others. If you look at antecedents of history, you don't just create personalities out of a sudden. They are, of course, personalities, organizations, movements. But in recent times, it took the personality of Habibie, who acted based on conscience. I mean, that was the most remarkable feature that I have noticed, and I wouldn't bore you by repeating this. When asked, you know, I spent a lot of time with him in Munich after my surgery, soon after I was released from prison, with him and the late wife, Ainun. And I always bother him with this barrage of questions endlessly. Why did you do that? You know, are you sure? You know, all these reasons. And of course, the thing that I quite disagree with him until now is the fact that he chose to resign. But his answer was never not that sophisticated reasons of the Socratic tradition or Tocqueville's democracy in America or ideological. No, he says my conscience, Anwar. You see, I was a scientist, aeronautical engineer, and vice president and president. When asked, it's a matter of conscience. Now, a democracy would function essentially. I mean, this is a good example. It's a matter of conscience, a clear conscience that you can't be unjust, that you can't have political prisoners, you can't have the judiciary working under the thumbs of the executive. You can't have media used to abuse people. This is a basic principle of ethics in governance. Now, I asked then President Tayyip Erdogan, soon after he was diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing treatment. And you know, his answer or reply reflects humanity. I mean, you can see he's quite abrasive in his style. Sometimes he seems to be quite angry in many of his remarks. But you ask him a personal question, so what? He said, yes. I happen to be Prime Minister of Turkey. I had the best treatment. I went to the best centers and hospitals. I had access to the best doctors. Now I am relatively well, alhamdulillah. Then other than praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my next task is, how do I ensure that every single citizen, including from the villages of Anatolia, get somewhat a reasonable treatment from what we consider as good hospitals. So he instructed his Minister of Finance to embark on a massive program to have the best medical services in history, in Turkey. I mean, this reflects, humanity, an issue of conscience. This, again, brings me to Tocqueville's Democracy in America. The guru is here, Surin, but why do I encourage my students every time I teach to read or reread Democracy in America? Now, there can be a fatwa to condemn me for encouraging to read American texts. May I remind them that this is not an American text. This happens to be a French philosopher who visited America trying to understand what took them to be able to transform with such conviction to have true democracy. And now there's a recent work on Jefferson, which is remarkable in terms of his ethical, religious, and respect for other religions, including Islam. I haven't finished the book, it's halfway through. That's the only advantage. If I get to prison, I can finish the book fast. But I don't think Aziza would agree, it's not a good option. But my point is, in that book, Democracy in America, I mean, young students and graduates, take note of this. Go back to the library. Since I can't enter the University of Malaya, you should. And the title is Democracy in America. The author is Alexis de Tocqueville. And he referred to this issue, or the thrust of democratic enterprise by the habits of the heart. That means it's inherent, embedded into the founding fathers, such love, commitment for freedom that you are not prepared to compromise. After all, there have been wars waged against the colonial masters, the British. Why do they reject British colonialism? Of course, no taxation without representation. But the central argument is for freedom and justice. If you believe in freedom and justice, it must be the dictate, the habits of the heart. So when that is somewhat summarized my introduction to this subject. When we talk about democracy or freedom of justice, well, I happen to be a political leader, I'm an opposition leader, so naturally people say, this is a political enterprise. No. It's a matter of conscience. You must believe in it. It is moral, it is ethical, it is what we, like in the American Constitution, there's that
life, liberty, and
and the pursuit of happiness. That is what we are. What there's a phrase at the beginning. That's
all men are created equal.
Yeah, all men are created equal. Yes, but there is a phrase that we is something endowed
Alienable rights.
inalienable rights. I mean, that's the point, because there's very clearly a maqasid of Sharia, ya Sheikh. Because it's inalienable rights. It's something that you cannot negotiate. This is where we fail to understand. Some of our Malay friends or Muslim friends, when they start questioning rights of Malays or right of Muslims or right of non-Muslims, they forget the fact that once you are a nation, you have what is the maqasid of the Sharia. What is incumbent, guaranteed, what is termed in the American Constitution by the founding fathers as inalienable right. You do not negotiate about freedom. You can give freedom, you can adjust. No, you don't. So that's how I understand, because some other scholars may have a deeper account of it. But what I understand And I'm very fortunate because when I was teaching at Georgetown, my neighbor happens to be Sheikh Taha Jabir Al-Alwani, who articulates this brilliantly. You know, what in terms of what we mean by the maqasid of the Sharia, because before International Institute of Islamic Thought, Mahad al-Fikr al-Alam al-Islami, embarked on this massive program to propagate and popularize the works of the maqasid of the Sharia, Shaykh Taha wrote to Muhammad al-Ghazali asking his opinion about the priority, because Shaykh Taha was then promoting the Turath, the Islamic legacy, because you have to create this debate, this awareness, and not be blinkered with one particular view that you cannot question, and reject this notion that we have too many authorities to determine what you should do and what you should not do. And the entire approach is the fiqh approach, what we call the fiqh mentality. Islam is only confined to the do's and the don'ts, including don't touch a dog. So, and that has created enormous problem in terms of understanding. I'm not expanding the subject. Don't worry, Iza. I'm sure she's nervous. Now, so I think if we get that in place, that when we talk about freedom, well, people do question, I mean, whether the terminology democracy is right, whether you use shura, whether you use the Indonesian musyawara, whatever. Not the semantics here, but the principle is that you allow for a broader interpretation of rights to even select your own leader and the priorities. Of course, they bring back to Mawardi's al-hal wal-aqdi, because those who qualify, but because of the difficulty in determining the strict qualification adherence to the principles of al-hal wal-aqdi, then people like Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi has broadened the interpretation to allow for the masses to determine and decide. And that is why you have from Qaradawi to Ghanousi promoting democratic reform, including in the Muslim world. So this initiative, and thank you, Jiro Hanyu and Sasakawa Peace Foundation, and I said last night, I even met Mr. Sasakawa himself, who seems to be the Japanese. They are quite unique in a sense in this enterprise, because most people talk about the Japanese in terms of the Sogo Soshas and the business and the trade. But Jiro Hanyu and the group thinks that there are other matters which should be given priority. That forms that sort of effective collaboration between us and Sasakawa Peace Foundation in their support for this particular program. And of course, extremely happy because some of my initial discussion was with then Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan. Of course, he said it's going to be a long process to get people to be convinced of this. And this was before the last elections, when I started initiating, broaching the subject with him. He said, Anwar, why did you confine and work to win the elections in Malaysia first? So I think probably I heeded his advice, so we went on to the elections and then come back to that issue of Muslim Democrat. And I thank Taha, who was then SETA chief, but now promoted a very, very key position as advisor to Prime Minister, our dear brother Ahmad Dautoglu. And of course, his support and presence is certainly very, very significant. But I'm pleased because what is more critical is, of course, the support of the foundation, Sasakawa Peace Foundation, but the direct participation involvement of Habibi Center, which I said central. It's not just Indonesia, but it's just Habibi. It's very critical. Because the way, if you understand the Indonesian Reformasi years, when he took over the presidency in such a short period of 17 months, transformed. I mean, it's not only the media, there have been publications on the subject, and I've also written a paper on that, my experience and my understanding, but there were other well-documented academic papers on that period. And of course, with Dr. Taha's Ozan's participation, he should recommend us some good literature on the Turkish experiment, particularly the ARC Party. I'm not just saying that we need to just promote. It's no matter promoting ARC Party or Tayyip Erdogan, but I think that experience is unique in terms of a democratic enterprise. It remains to be seen. People are still critical. There are major issues to be resolved. There are issues affecting the border. And in many ways, I know many leaders, East and West and the Arab world, who completely dislike Tayyip Erdogan for reasons known to us. I was there at the time of the siege of Gaza. His reaction, it's not like an ordinary politician, but he says this is haram. They are treating Gaza like an open-air prison. You see, he's less diplomatic. I'm more diplomatic than him. But that stems from a view, a Democrat, but very strong commitment in terms of justice. When we talk about those days, General Sisi, after General Sisi took over, you know, his address in Istanbul and in New York, saying that the hypocrisy of Western governments. You talk about democracy, and you invite dictators. You dance with the dictators. You know, there's an old book about Marcos, dancing with the dictators. So similarly. So I think now we are clear now what we don't want, what we don't support, and some of our concerns. We don't support extremism, fanaticism, Boko Haram, ISIL, etc., etc. That's known. We express our concern, Gaza, the atrocities committed in Syria by Bashar Assad, the dictatorship in Egypt, the concerns with our neighbors, Rohingyas, which Surin tried hard to do. You know, I was one of the few things I was very, very disturbed when he was Secretary General of ASEAN. I know he was trying his best, but he is working under constraints. I see, what is my friend doing? The constraints. Because very little is said by ASEAN leaders. I mean, here it's just neighbors. It took Tayyip Erdogan to send his wife to visit and show sympathy to the victims in Rohingya. And now, of course, Mr. Sasakawa himself now, you know, is virtually like the ambassador at large, trying to work out a mechanism to try to resolve part of the problem. But none of us, I feel ashamed to say, none of leaders in our society show this concern. But having said that, we can't be all the time troubled by the court case on sodomy too, or only the problems of Gaza or Bangladesh now, daily sentencing of to death by former Jamaat Islami leaders or Rohingyas. We have to chart a new program. That is why I believe our friends and colleagues, and thank you Khalid for co-hosting this event, to chart what we need to do, at least a forum of Muslim Democrats who are committed to certain basic principles. I mean, you can't call yourself Democrat if you believe in controlling completely the media, like we have here. You can't have a Democrat when you don't have a judiciary that is independent. You can't call yourself a Democrat that you give weekly fatwas against those people you disagree with. There must be mechanism taken place. There must be enough tolerance of tasamuh. There must be this space, the muruna, that we observe, which is very required. But let's not run away from the basic principle that we are talking about. Relevance of Islam, the ethical principles of Islam. And I remember in the 70s, when we talk about Islamization, we are always guided by that principle, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Reassertion of the faith and moral and ethical values. There's no compromise to that. Some people think that it means a secular framework leaving religion and ethics. Not necessarily. That's not right. It's a reassertion of our faith and moral values. But this must be a democratic enterprise, meaning enough tolerance, enough inclusiveness and space, which I think is shared by entire panelists. So you can't say you must detain people you disagree or ban people just because you choose to disagree with them. These are principles that you have to lay down. It is a very difficult enterprise. It takes a lot of patience and understanding. And what Raymond Aaron must have said, the unlearning of some of the old normative modes, because it's how we understand the religion. We have to be more open. And I'm pleased that we have to open up, because Surin referred to Rumi, and I referred to last night to Al-Kawakibi, which I'm hoping to popularize a bit because of his major attack on despotism. And then, of course, Muhammad Iqbal, because he talks about ijtihad. And Abdu, who talks about mujtama' madani, civil society, and with clear ethical, moral basis in that formulation. So this is a good beginning, this conference, for the forum. So we establish the ground rules, what we mean, and I think in the next session there has been a suggestion both by Jakarta or Istanbul to host. I go along because Habibie Center did host some month back the initial preparatory meeting. So we may have a similar follow-up meeting in Istanbul. Otherwise, if things get well, we can have a proper forum here, probably much later. But for now, I think the committee, the key conveners, it's not me alone, Jiro is kind, or Khalid to say I'm the convener. We, the conveners, will have to decide on the venue and probably a more structured program, because it has to emerge as a forum of Muslim Democrats. Certain positions that we take, which is not necessarily just governments or not even just political parties. I think it might represent parties, it might represent academics, or intellectuals, or civil society that share this version. I'm also very much in touch with the international Muslim NGOs, which is headquartered in Istanbul, in Turkey, which is actually an umbrella organization of all Muslim organizations in the world. And I think we need to coordinate with them too, because it has these tentacles to the grassroots level to appreciate and understand. More need to be done, more literature is required, but at least among the elites and the political elites, we need to have that sort of broad understanding. But what is most impressive from the session, although I miss Dr. Taha's and some other earlier sessions, the Watik presentation this morning, because I was at the federal court listening to the abuse against me. Yuck, very difficult. But from the session this evening, I'm very pleased and thank the brother, because there you sense that sort of similarities and a common sort of agenda or platform. I mean, I've known many of them. Pawati, of course, very much involved with the Habibie Center and President Habibie in inner circle from the beginning, with Ima, of course, the new radical young voice. And then Surin, of course, has been there, tested, a great Democrat on his own, remarkable historical experience. Dr. Taha, who was then from SETA, with probably the most prominent Muslim democratic experiment in modern times. There is Turkey. So I think we have a very good start, and but I can't thank more Jiro Hanyu, who has been a pillar to this exercise, who's been very supportive, whose understanding of Islam has gone far better from when I first met or known him. So it explains well, you know, that we need to promote this, not only to Muslims. You know, there's always this worry about the Muslim. Why must the issue of Muslim democracy or Muslim Democrats be joined by non-Muslims? I hope there should not be another fatwa on the subject. But to me, that is a source of strength. Last night, I alluded to the same point. Why is it, when I was Deputy Prime Minister, organized the first major conference on Islam and Confucianism, bringing the world experts on Islam and on Confucianism, including Tu Wei Ming, Harvard professor of Neo-Confucianism, it was not a controversy. Yeah? People support that. Now, if you start talking about that, you become a pluralistic, and there's a fatwa against pluralism. So there is therefore, that's why last night I called upon the Fatwa Council to reevaluate some of these views, to listen to other arguments, and to understand that there are many versions, many meanings of liberalism or pluralism. Because otherwise, you just pick and choose and then come with a strong judgment. I read a brilliant paper by Sheikh Rashid Ghanousi recently, and he personally, when I spoke to him, asked me, I said, no, please, take note of the paper and give your comments. Of course, I would not give my comments, but then the fact that he mentioned this, because he was aware about the criticism of my lecture, the London School of Economics, on Islam and pluralism. You know, it's Sheikh Rashid Ghanousi who's talking about Islam and pluralism. That the way forward for Muslim parties or Muslims is to understand the need to be inclusive and pluralistic. Not in the sense to suggest that Islam is similar to all religions, because it was a faith, it's issue which is separate. Not to say that you can pray like others pray, but to be more inclusive and to appreciate the need to collaborate and work with one another. So I must thank you again. Arigatou gozaimasu. To the and thank you. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Dato Sri Anwar. Let's give a round of applause to Dato Sri Anwar. Thank you, audience, for your very attentive